Hey everybody, this is Mike with the One Stop Co-op Shop, and it's been a little bit, but I'm doing another Arkham Horror the card game campaign review, and I was going from the oldest to the newest, but then I played the Feast of Hemlock Vale, and it was awesome, and I wanted to jump right to it, so now that I've finished it, played 1.5 full campaigns, let's talk about this newest expansion with color out of space vibes going on. And if you haven't seen my previous reviews, I'm going to talk about the investigators, the general campaign mechanics, the scenarios, but I'll keep it all pretty spoiler free, so you should be able to watch this and still enjoy the campaign and discover everything for yourself. So let's start out where we usually do with the investigators and the new investigator cards. And the big new mechanic for this one, which is not new at all, is the addition of bless and curse tokens that go in the chaos bag through your own actions and your own plays. And when you draw them, they give you a bonus or penalty to your skill test, but then they get taken out of the bag and you draw another token. And I love that they use these again because they were previously, I forget which campaign expansion it was, but they were previously using only one other campaign, which meant as cool as they didn't have as much like kind of combos and utility because you'd kind of have to focus on them and build with a very small pool of cards. So while having two expansions instead of only one isn't like amazing, I definitely enjoy these tokens and the cards that work with them and just things that kind of like mess with the chaos bag in general. So very happy to see this mechanic getting some love again. Now, zooming in on the investigators, the first one, the Guardian, is Wilson Richards. If you saw my playthrough, this is the one that I used. He's very balanced across the board in terms of statistics, and his big thing is that he plays tools more cheaply, gets bonuses when he uses tools, and can include tools from basically any class in his deck. He's a little bit of a jack of all trades, which means that, I'm not sure if he's great. I certainly only had mixed success with him in my game. Although he is very good at getting clues, I had a harder time making him be kind of a fighter. But he's a very straightforward, easy-to-use character. Then for the survivors, we've got Hank Sampson, who I think might be the strongest survivor ever with 5 strength. Wow. His big thing is he can take damage for other people, and when he's defeated, he actually comes right back, because look, he only has 5 and 5, so it's pretty quick. He comes back as one of 2 versions. He can either double down on his combat and also get some really good willpower, or kind of become a bit more balanced. So a cool character, again, not like anything super unique and exciting, but also definitely fun and tanky and versatile, so that's Hank Sampson. Then for our mystic character, we've got Kohaku Narukami, and he really goes in for those bless and curse tokens. He adds 1 to the bag every round. And by the way, I didn't mention that this expansion includes this little counter to keep track of how many are in, whoops, that's upside down, to keep track of how many are in the bag, which is super important for somebody like this guy because he is adding a token based on which there are fewer of in the bag. So like you can keep track as you add and remove them. Definitely a nice feature. But then you can remove doubles of the tokens to get a 4th action in the turn, so that's pretty awesome. Pretty straightforward besides that. He does have the ability to add in a ton of blessed and curse cards from any class, so he can really lean into that bless and curse mechanic if you want to. So a solid character there, and yeah, great stats, by the way. 1 evasion, 1 agility, but the rest is really solid. Next, we have a bit of a goofier one, Kate Winthrop, who is the Seeker for this set. And she's been a mainstay of all the like Arkham and Eldritch games with her Flux capacitor or Flux stabilizer. In this case, it's really interesting. It starts on its inactive side, and when she gets clues, she can, as a free action, move a clue onto it. And when she does, she gets to take one of these etheric current cards and shuffle it into her deck, and it flips to its active side. And then when she puts clues on assets she controls, she gets an extra skill value. And when she plays one of these, she gets all her clues back because when they're on assets, if the asset goes away, it goes onto her location, so she could lose the clues. But both of these are basically super powerful cards that just like get rid of enemies. The fight one lets her use her intelligence to fight, and she can teleport the enemy really far away. And the evasion one just shuffles the enemy into the deck, which is pretty awesome. So yeah, very cool, fun little skill set there. Focus around this, although she can just be like a pretty regular Seeker with 4 intelligence and be effective that way too. Okay, and then the one that I think is the most interesting for the set is Alessandra Zorzi, the Rogue. Pretty good stat line, very good intelligence, nice agility, decent willpower. But she gets an extra action every turn only to parlay, very different than the rogues that get like free evasions and such. But what makes that so cool is that she's got 3 copies of these Beguile cards. It's fast, it does cost 2. And she attaches it to a non-elite enemy, and then she can use parlay actions, even if she's not in the same location as those enemies, to move them, to have them investigate, or to have them evade. So she can basically like move around people and make them dance to her tune with her free parlay action. Pretty dang cool way to leverage enemies and get them out of the way while also using them to accomplish goals without putting yourself in harm's way. Now, if she fails a skill test with somebody who's beguiled, the card goes away, so she can't necessarily do it forever. But yeah, I think she is a very interesting take on sort of that like con person controlling trope in movies and such. So she's a lot of fun. Okay, that's our investigators plus the bless and curse. Let's get to the campaign itself. So in terms of campaign mechanics, there's some really cool and unique things going on here. First of all, something I'm going to say is a mixed bag for me are the preludes. So 3 times in the game, you will have these preludes where you put out these cards for the town, and you don't draw encounter cards. You basically just have a timer of a number of turns, and you're trying to walk around and investigate the town and talk to people. And I'll say again, these are a mixed bag for me because replaying the campaign, I found that I was seeing some of the same things, although generally you can't reach everything. You are going to find new things each time you play. But also it does involve a decent amount of setup, and then they're like really quick, and you just read some stuff and you move on generally. So they're fine. They are interesting. And a key thing to note is that in this campaign, you only play 6 real scenarios out of 8. So there are still 8 scenarios, but you only play 6 of them in a given run of the campaign. So you can kind of think of these preludes as sort of making up for those 2 missions you're not doing, and you can earn experience in them. So yeah, they're okay. Now, related to the preludes are relationship levels, and this part I love. So in the preludes and also in the different scenarios, you're going to have opportunities to befriend and become close to these different characters from the Vale, each of them with a relationship level that can go up to 6. And I use one of the apps for Arkham Horror that tracks all of this. I can imagine you could print out something, though, to do the same thing. And yeah, based on what you do, what choices you make, how you kind of focus on and seek out these people, some of them might join you in key scenarios and help you out a ton or save you from dangers, or some of them might turn against you. You'll see that they have like sort of an evil side for most of them. And I just think this is awesome. It adds a lot of like narrative flair to the game. It adds a lot of variety because, again, you're not going to have time to befriend a lot of them. So like in my full campaign, I think I became like really close with about 3 out of 8. So trying out and seeing different ways to find the other ones and become friends with them is really a neat way to add replay here. Another thing that I do think works really well are the codex entries. So basically when you achieve certain things, many of them related to these characters and like doing stuff with them during the scenarios, you'll read these little codex entries, which are quick little like narrative beats that also give you quick little bonuses many times. And these are fast enough generally. They don't interrupt the flow of play very much. They don't like have earth-shattering changes that force you to reset up the entire map. But I think it really works well hand in hand with the characters themselves to make them feel more lived and more interesting as people, and to again give you more replay and discovering what other interactions you can have with them. Now, I've kind of buried the lead here. Maybe the biggest unique thing here, this is like a little bit like the Scarlet Keys, although not quite, is that you're going to play through 3 days and 3 nights. And in each of the days, you get to pick one of these 5 scenarios to go to. So that's, again, where you're not going to see every scenario. And then in the nighttime, you can pick to go to another one at a cost, at a penalty, or see some other scenario. And this means that you can play the scenarios in very different orders. You can not play some scenarios and focus on other ones in a given campaign. And the coolest thing, I adore this, is that different things will happen based on which of the 3 days or nighttime you do these scenarios. Different enemies will be in play. Different objectives might be in play. Different characters will show up. Or it might be too late. You might have let them die by waiting too long to go there. So I think this is just so cool. Again, this might have, I gotta say it, this might, because of all this stuff, have the best replay of any Arkham Horror campaign I have ever played. And that's saying something. I already played through it 1.5 times, and there's still so much stuff I haven't seen, even though I've done every single scenario at least once. Final thing I'll mention that's pretty unique to this campaign, although not every scenario has it, is that a lot of the scenarios will have you adding locations as you go. And for many of them, location adjacency is determined by what you're orthogonally adjacent to instead of the normal icons kind of showing which location you can move to. So it does tend to give more like variety and replay to how the scenarios play out. It reminds me a bit of something like Forgotten Age and the exploration mechanic, although you always get the location added. It's not like that thing where you have to dig through a deck and maybe get some negative cards. So yeah, there's a lot of super cool mechanics here. The only one that is a little hit or miss for me is the prelude system, because again, those can get a little bit boring and slightly samey when you play over and over. But everything else is a slam dunk. I think this is one of the coolest, most replayable, most engaging campaigns they've ever done in terms of mechanics. Now for the narrative, I'll call this a bit of a success, a bit of a failure in my mind. I mean, it's still fun, don't get me wrong. The success part goes back to those characters. I love the little storylines. Each of them has major problems that you can resolve if you do the right things, if you go to the right scenarios. That really gives you kind of a meaningful sense to your actions, like you're actually making a difference in these people's lives. I love that. So all the story related to the characters is awesome. But the main story you're trying to prevent, it's okay. If you've seen like any horror movies involving, sort of like idyllic villages, I'm thinking of things like The Wicker Man or Midsummer or anything like this, you're kind of going to know what to expect. It's also, again, based heavily on the color out of space if you've read the old Lovecraft story. And the thing is, like, I don't know. From the very beginning, I'm like, oh, so here's what's going on. Here's how these people are messed up. And that's what it was. So, like, the story didn't surprise me much. The narrative went the regular Arkham Horror, the card game route, where it's like, evil people summoning Dark Elder God, crazy Dark Elder God stuff happens and you have to get out of it. Like it sort of followed similar tropes to the other campaigns. But again, the character focus and like the narrative connected to the individual characters, love all of that. All right, now let's go through each of the scenarios. And like usual, I'm not going to give any major spoilers, just kind of talk about what I thought of them in general. The Silent Heath is pretty fun. I found it very challenging. It does really use kind of the exploration mechanic and putting down extra locations in a cool way. But I also found this one very, very swingy because it's one of those ones where just by chance you might find the exact things you need right away or have to dig through like tons of places to find them. So good one, definitely tense, a lot of danger from like things chasing after you. But yeah, it's a little bit swingy in terms of luck. Hemlock House was also just okay for me. This one is very interesting in that you're kind of like fighting with the location cards. Never seen that before, so that's a super cool mechanic. And it does have kind of two very different branching paths to it, so that's fun for replay. But yeah, I did find it to get a little repetitive once we kind of locked into what we were trying to do. So I didn't find this one as replayable and exciting as some of the others. Written Rock, cool as heck. This one is basically, again, I don't want to spoil too much, but it's basically like the Indiana Jones Temple of Doom minecart sequence as a scenario, and it's so cool. I will say it is a little like claustrophobic and limiting because when you're in the minecart, you can't necessarily do it a lot, and you can't move independently, but apart from that, the kind of the puzzle of getting everything to line up, the challenge of trying to survive and like not move too quickly or too slowly, management of special resources you get, I thought this one was just a blast. Lost Sister is another one that was just okay for me. Similar to the Silent Heath, it has a lot of exploration, but also a lot of luck of the draw of specific locations coming up at specific times. But I did think this one ended better for me than Silent Heath. It had a very exciting kind of end game, a good theme, and this one used, in my opinion, characters in some of the coolest ways, and you got like a lot of characters to help you out, well, depending on when you go. So yeah, this one is better than Silent Heath for me, but still is kind of swingy, just something to be aware of. The Thing in the Depths is another one that I think is great. Basically, it's kind of like you're playing Forbidden Island in that your location cards are slowly sinking into the muck. And this one is also, in a cool way, I think, a bit of an escort mission where you have something you are trying to safely lead somewhere and you have to stop things from attacking it, but also like spend clues to get it to move in the right direction. Now, this one might frustrate some people if they don't like the locations going away. They don't like the escort aspect, but I think it's just great. I had an awesome time with this one, along with Written in the Rock, probably my favorite of the basic 5 in this set. Okay, then we have a few that are a bit more required. So Twisted Hollow is one that you're sort of suggested to do in night 1, although you can pay a cost to do a different one. And this one I did really like a lot. I have played through it more than the other ones because, again, it's sort of required each time you play. But you're managing a lantern and dark and light locations, and the locations keep on kind of switching around on you. But except for one part where you are digging for a specific location, and again, you can get lucky or not, I feel like this one did a better job than the other two of kind of letting your exploration reward you no matter where you went and not like trying to swing into specific places too much. So I think this one is really fun. The Longest Night is a little odd. I'm not sure how I feel about this one. This is the semi-required scenario for Night 2. And it's basically a tower defense one. And what's cool is that you can defend the tower, as it were, using investigation and putting out like traps and things, or just straight up beating monsters. Now, I played it true solo, and the first time I got my butt kicked completely. The second time I did very well on it. But I've heard from people who have played with higher player counts that it can be super hard to manage and like not every character can necessarily contribute fully. But I think it's really tense. I'm not sure if it'll have a ton of replay. That's the one thing. boring because there's not really much to investigate. You're pretty much just fighty. So, I think a bit of a mixed bag for this one as well. Not a bad scenario and definitely very different and cool what they did with it, but also not my favorite in the set. And then the final scenario, Fate of the Vale. I thought this one was really, really neat. It is super hard. Well, I should say it's quite varied because you have extremely different victory conditions that kind of pursue. And there's actually a prelude before this one that's more involved than the other preludes, so it's almost like a scenario and a half. But yeah, this one, the second half of it goes in very different directions based on what you want to accomplish. And I thought they seemed really cool, at least, with the one I fully played and the other one I tried out a little bit of. I did find the difficulty quite different based on which one I tried, but also that's because they led to better or worse endings, so it kind of made thematic and mechanical sense. But yeah, I think this is one of the cooler finishing scenarios out of all the campaigns I've played. Just a nice way to cap off the story overall. So yeah, Feast of Hemlock Vale, there are some caveats here. I think some of the scenarios are a little bit too swingy at times. I think the preludes might annoy some people. Not everyone is going to love that the new Investigator cards are so heavily focused on blessings and curses. But for me, the great character stories, the awesome variety in how you tackle the scenarios and how they play out based on which day it is, makes this one of my favorite campaigns I have ever played in the game. And that's saying something because it's one of my favorite games of all time. So definitely worth checking out if you're an Arkham fan. The Feast of Hemlock Vale, I think Fantasy Flight did a great job on this. Thanks for watching, everybody, and a special thank you to our biggest Patreon supporters, J. William F., Pedro Lucas, Steve Wren, Miles, Wayne Scott, and J. Willie M.F. We'll see you at the next stop.